Hey, it's Ethan Skolnick. It has been a long time. This is Ethan Skolnick starting 9 here on a Monday morning. Manny Chang is producing today. We're going to talk Miami Heat. Make sure you check out the latest episode of 5 on the Floor. That's on the podcast feed. We did our last review. We finally got to the end. We cheated a little bit. We combined Victor Oladipo and Gabe Vincent. So our season reviews and kind of looking forward for those players. And you can catch that on all the podcast feeds. Pretty soon, you'll be able to catch it in more places. We started a partnership with Fansided. It's not activated yet, but we're heading that direction. Also, check out all the other content. I believe Alex Dono's back today here on the YouTube channel in the afternoon. So make sure you hit the like and subscribe buttons, and you'll get all of that. All right, I do want to tell you about our sponsors before we get started. This is going to be a viewer-heavy episode today. I'm going to take questions from everybody. Again, we kind of sprung this on you, so I don't know how many we'll get, but we're going to do this for 20 minutes or thereabouts. We are sponsored here today by our friends over at Better Edge, BETTOR. edge.com/5 reasons is where you want to go. What makes this one different? Well, first thing, it's not offshore, it's legal. So you don't have to deal with the issue of whether or not you're going to get money from you will, okay? And again, you're not going to get any trouble. It's legal in 45 states. This is peer-to-peer betting. So what that means is you're actually betting against others on the site. You're not betting against the site. It also means that you can get the line that you want. So, like, let's say, again, I know there's no NBA, and now after last night, there's no NHL, but there's still baseball going on. There's MMA, there's boxing, there's golf, there's other sports that are happening over the summer. And you can go to Better Edge, and you can basically find the line that you want, and that will give you the payout that is according to that. But, again, it's very different from the other sites where you're kind of stuck with the line that they give you. So go to Better Edge. It's BETTOR, edge.com/5 reasons, okay? And then you'll get $20 to play. That's our $20 referral bonus. So basically, you have nothing to risk. So if you like a baseball part, you like a baseball play tonight, just play it. Give it a shot and try to win some money. I know some of our guys have gotten very familiar with the platform and they really like it. It's BETTOR edge.com/5 reasons. All right, so let's get to a short little monologue here, and then I'll get to some of the questions. The Miami Heat are in one of those kind of in-between positions right now as they enter free agency. And, of course, free agency comes up later in the week. And this is what I mean by that, okay? They are a contender. You cannot get to the Eastern Conference Finals and be 4 points away from actually reaching the finals and not be considered a contender, especially when you haven't lost anybody of significance yet. So they are a contender, okay? But they are not a powerhouse. And I think everybody who follows the Heat, but all those inside the Heat organization, recognize that. Last year, before the season, I spoke to some high-up officials with the Heat who said, look, we went all in on Kyle Lowry because we think there are between 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 teams that could legitimately win a championship this year. And as I go back and look at that list, I don't think the Warriors were on it. So it means that there were actually 9 teams that were in the mix there. Now, some of the teams that they thought could win a championship, the Lakers, the Nets, they kind of petered out. But others, the Suns, they were right there. The Bucks, obviously, I mean, the Suns were right there in the regular season. Obviously, they were dominant in the regular season. We'll see if they come back intact with the Ayton situation. Milwaukee, basically ran it back for the most part, at least their core, and then Middleton got hurt. Boston, I don't know if the Heat were really considering Boston to be that big a threat. Philadelphia was certainly in the mix. They, as always, proved to be kind of paper contenders. And then, also in the West, you didn't know what the health of the Clippers was going to be. That's going to be more of, I think you would assume, more health for them this season. They may have a major move in store as well. And so there are still a lot of teams that are contenders. And the Heat are on a different timeline than some of those contenders. Okay, when Giannis Antetokounmpo is your star, even if you're sort of maxed out with your other 2 kind of co-stars, you can always reshape the thing in the future because you'll just rebuild it around Giannis, right? And that's the case in some other places. I would say maybe Philadelphia with Embiid, provided that he stays healthy. Denver, health. I think Denver was one of the teams the Heat were considering as a contender last year. But the health of Murray and Porter obviously, damaged that. But with Jokic, you have some time to kind of build there, right? Like Even when you had Kawhi and Paul, when you thought that they were going to be healthy, you had some time to build. But when your guy is Jimmy Butler and he's 32 years old, you don't have the same time frame as some of those other franchises. And especially when you feel like you owe it to Jimmy because he's done everything that you could have expected and more. And I'm not just talking about what he's done in the playoffs and leading the franchise, but I'm talking about his decision to come here in the first place, which got us out of the sort of the dark era of Whiteside and Richardson and James Johnson. So I believe the Heat are trying to be aggressive right now. Okay. I believe they're in on everybody. I mean, this thing about what the Heat are interested in. Well, of course. Of course. Okay. Now, can you get it done? Sometimes it's out of your control. And I say this all the time. Like Bradley Beal. Like, you cannot make a man want to win. I'm sorry. Like, there's only so much you can do. He wants to be there, live his comfy career out, get his money. Okay, maybe he ends up getting traded on that deal at some point. I mean, what are you going to do? Utah, I mean, you can't necessarily make them blow it up, although I think they probably should. And you can't make Danny Ainge trade with somebody who said, shut the bleep up and go manage your own team. Chicago, big city for Zach LaVine. They were good before the injuries hit. I still think they're a little ways away. But I think he's ultimately going to go, I think he's going to take the money and stay. And then there's Kyrie. And yes, I do believe the Heat are in on Kyrie. Okay. I don't think anything scares them. They know he's difficult. I've talked to people inside the Heat organization for years who referenced how difficult he was. They were wrong about one thing. There's someone very high up, I'm not going to out him, but in the Heat organization, who actually, when the Kyrie for Kemba trade was made, felt it was an upgrade for Boston because they got Kyrie's craziness out of there. Obviously, Kemba's basically done now. Kyrie's still an elite player when he chooses to be a player. So, look, are they in on him? Of course they're in on him. Come on, okay? Now, can they make something happen with what they have? I mean, possibly. It's going to require probably Lowry and Hero if the Nets want to do that. And then you've reshaped the thing completely. And then you have to deal with the mercurial nature of the player that you just brought in. Could they be in on Durant? Of course. Okay. Is that a Pat move? Yes. Is Windhorst right about that? That's the Godfather move? Absolutely. I always reference 2004. Pat made an offer sheet to Elton Brand. Elton Brand was here vacationing in South Florida. He got back to his phone, okay, and saw that Donald Sterling had matched the offer to him. He was furious. He was upset. He didn't want to stay with the Clippers. But Pat had a plan. Next day, offer sheet to Lamar Odom. Same team. He liked Lamar better, actually. They got Lamar Odom. They had a resurgent season. They traded Lamar Odom and Caron Butler, and they got Shaq. Then the year after that, when they didn't win because Dwayne pulled his ribcage muscle, they didn't sit there and say, well, if Dwayne hadn't pulled the ribcage muscle, we probably win Game 7 and then we beat San Antonio in the finals. No, Pat made a bunch of trades. He brought in 5 players. He brought in Antoine Walker and James Posey and Gary Payton and Jason Williams. And then that didn't work very well for a little while. It was kind of a disaster, right? Stan leaves. Pat comes in. Even then, it didn't work so well for a little while. Dwayne and Gary Payton screaming at each other, 2-2 in Chicago in the first round. But then Dwayne went nuclear, and ultimately it worked. So I'm saying all this to say, yes, the Heat are in on things. Okay? They're in on things. The question is, can you get the other player or the other team to move in a way that you want them to move so that you can make the move that you want to make? And if not, what's the secondary move? And then what do you lose in the meantime? And that's where the PJ Tucker situation comes into play. You don't like to have to deal with these distractions when you're trying to put a roster together, but it happens, okay? I talked to someone in the Heat organization last night who said that they don't feel, this is going to be a lot of double negatives, they don't feel that PJ is gone, okay? I know Mark Stein has reported it's pretty much a done deal. I think it's closer to that than I thought it was 3 or 4 days ago, but I don't believe that it's done based on the Heat not believing that it's done. Then again, someone very high up with the Heat in 2014 told me LeBron was never leaving when free agency started, and I had players telling me, yeah, he's gone. Why don't they know that? So organization doesn't always know everything. Anyway, at this point, if Manny can, We're going to take some questions here. I do want to tell you about another sponsor, the 5 Reasons Sportsbook. Andrew, I'll get to that in a second. I do want to mention one thing. All Pro Construction Builders. I should have mentioned this before we go. This is our friend Danny. He's a big Heat fan. He may text me at some point to see what they're doing. You have to reach out to Danny at All Pro Construction Builders. You can find him on Instagram at that address. You can call Danny at 305-484-4429 because hurricane season is right around the corner. We've avoided a big one for a long time. That's probably not going to last long. If you're looking to protect your home or business, well, you should be, okay? Get the impact windows and doors for the residential and commercial properties. They service Miami-Dade, Monroe, but also Broward County. They use locally made American products, okay? 10% off if you mention 5 Reasons, and that's in addition to the free estimate. So get the free estimate. You like what he says, you like what Danny and his team says, they're a family-owned business, then you get a 10% discount. So reach out to Danny at 305-484-4429. That's 305-484-4429. And that is All Pro Construction Builders. All right, let's get to it. I saw Andrew threw one up. We'll get to a few questions here. 2022 offseason, give me a vibe similar to 2020 offseason already. Not re-signing Tucker Crowder, not trading for Kyrie, relying on internal growth. Look, if everything falls through, that'll be what they say. I will just say this. I would be surprised if everybody's back. I think at the very least, Duncan's going to be flipped. But I think you're holding out the Duncan piece because for a lot of these deals, you need that contract. So again, this is you have a plan, but there's a plan after the plan after the plan. I think the Jay Tucker comparison is interesting, but it's not exactly the same thing. With Jay, they were saving room for Giannis, okay? So they didn't want to go the extra year, and I understood it at the time. The problem was they took a very cheap flyer on Mo Harkless, and that was kind of a disaster. And then it ended up leading to Ariza, and then Myers Leonard falling out, and it didn't work out very well. And it was a tired team. We know kind of what happened with that team. I don't think this is they want PJ back. I just think that, honestly, I think the pull of PJ playing with his friend at this point, maybe some of this. He and Harden are close, and they always have been close. So some of this, again, maybe an out of the Heat's control situation. Do you give him 3 years at 30? I mean, it's a lot. I would say that, the luxury tax, and people don't talk about this, and they're like, oh, he's a billionaire, nobody cares. Carnival stock at one point was $70, okay? I mean, this is where Mickey made his money. Carnival stock was $70, okay? It went all the way down to about $9 during COVID because nobody was taking cruises, right? He sold like a small percentage to the Saudis. It went all the way up to 28, which is not significant when you're talking about it was at $70, okay? But it went to 28. It's now at 11, okay? And that's after a good day on Friday. So his core holding, Carnival, where he is, I believe, still CEO, okay? He's down what, 70 to 11? 80%? More than that? I wonder if that's going to start playing into some decisions here. Because I think by now there was a thought that the cruise industry would be back. And so that holding would be back, and it's not. So I know nobody's going to feel sorry for Mickey, but just understand there are other things at play here that fans don't really always think about. All right, go ahead. What else we got? Thank you, Adam. We appreciate it. That's going to help me pay for Carnival stock. We always take the super chat. What moves do you see Miami making, assuming that Tucker goes to Philly at 3 for 30? Do you see Portis or even re-signing Morris? I would be surprised if Markieff Morris is back. I didn't get a good feeling about that towards the end of the year. Remember, Spo needed the guy I like. I know that. The other guy I would watch is the other Morris. He'd be much more expensive, obviously, but they were in on Marcus Morris 2 years ago. He is still a player of interest to them. And then we always talk about Harrison Barnes, who for a lot of reasons would be a really good, versatile fit for them, offensively and all the rest of it. Now, he's not – the thing about Harrison Barnes is he doesn't really fit the personality of the rest of this team. He's kind of an introvert. He's a really bright guy. He's not a dog, though. So he's a different kind of four, much more skilled than any of the ones they've had recently, whether it's Jay or PJ or Trevor Ariza. But he's not like a fierce rebounder. He's an interesting player. I think he could be attained, okay? But I again, he's a little bit of a different personality fit. Okay, what else we got? Would Pat rather trade for Kyrie right now if there's a chance to wait or Katie's situation resolved? This is always the issue. Do you go for the bird kind of in the hand or wait for, two in the bush and all the rest of this? I think that I mean, you can help it blow up and maybe not end up getting the player and then get the other player that you want. I don't think they'd have any problem taking on Kyrie Irving. I mean, one thing is vaccination is not an issue in this state. Nobody's ever given a damn. So I think that they're definitely in on, like, they investigate everybody. Okay, they investigate everybody, and they're going to look at this. I've said before that a couple years ago when Kawhi was having his situation in San Antonio, they looked into that. I heard Bam was on the table at that point. Everybody was on the table. Okay, and again, Bam wasn't the Bam he is now. But I know that medicals were requested and all kinds of stuff like that. But I also know that the Heat had some misgivings about Kawhi because of his, not him necessarily, but everybody around him. They didn't really want to deal with that. That camp has a reputation of being even more difficult than some of the ones the Heat have dealt with. And the Heat have dealt with Shaq's camp and LeBron's camp. Jimmy doesn't really have a camp. It's really much more so just dealing with Jimmy. But Kawhi is difficult, but they were in on him anyway. San Antonio ended up making the trade for DeRozan. Let's take 4 more here. Go ahead. So it's much more likely the Heat get another third or fourth option than a Robin. If I was to bet on something, I would say that, and I don't think it's because they're not trying or they wouldn't give up what they felt they needed to give up. I think it's because some of these players we've talked about, I just don't think are ultimately going to move. Okay. I mean, we know about Beal. My guess is Levine ends up just taking the money in Chicago. Okay. You look at Utah's situation. I mean, you need it. You need them to decide they're going a totally different direction and that they're going to trade the player who's on the best contract. Right. And, it's a new coach. And, I think they need to blow it up. I think they need a change. I don't think just reshaping it around Gobert and Mitchell is going to work. I think they know that. But is Danny going to deal? Is Danny Ainge? Forget the Dwayne thing, okay? I mean, Dwayne can't make this happen, okay? Is Danny Ainge going to deal with Pat Riley on this? I don't think so. All right, 3 more. 3 more. Dunkin Robinson, what are we looking to get in return for him? I think if they could get I think that Dunkin Robinson, if you're not using his contract for one of the big names, I think his contract is basically used to get you a more skilled, younger PJ Tucker replacement. I think that was what they were trying to do with Jeremy Grant, and I think that's what they would try to do with Harrison Barnes. I think that's the piece that you use. The complication is with Duncan is that Duncan works best on a contender, okay? A team that can cover up his defensive flaws and needs another shooter. He works best on a team like Miami. And even with that, he didn't play in the big moments, whether it was in the playoffs or down the stretch. So, it's a difficult trade because it's difficult to see who would want his skill set. A contender would, but again, he didn't play down the stretch on a contender for Miami. A bad team doesn't really need Duncan Robinson. It's not like you're going to give the ball to Duncan and say, get me 20, right? Like a bad team, he doesn't serve a ton of, he can provide some space for some of your players. But so, honestly, the best situation for Duncan Robinson was the Miami Heat. It's just that, obviously, others who are less expensive, Strus in particular, passed him this season because they could do more things. All right, 2 more. Thanks for making it. Mark Stein said that Brooklyn wants to trade Kyrie to Miami, but Riley doesn't seem too interested. I respect Mark a lot. I've known Mark a long time. I'm not questioning Mark's reporting. I would not totally buy into the fact that Pat isn't that interested. I think, a lot of this is gamesmanship, okay? And that can change. This is the most difficult question. Thanks, James, for saving it for last. Do you think the Heat would send Bam for Durant? Actually, I was just on a show where this was the main question. Do I think they would? I I think they would have to know they had other pieces they could fit around it. And here's why, okay? Bam is the bridge to the next era. If you're getting Duncan, if you're getting Durant, who's had injury issues, and you have Jimmy, who's older, okay, you are basically banking on winning because of those two and the pieces around them. And I remember when the Heat got Shaq in 2004, Pat said, this is not a one-year build. It's going to take us a couple of years, a couple of off seasons to put the right pieces around. Remember, he plugged in Damon Jones, okay? And they had kind of a weird bench around that group. And they almost made it anyway. Like I said, Dwayne pulled a ribcage muscle. If not, they probably go to the finals, and they likely beat I was not the best of the San Antonio teams, okay? But then the next offseason, he made the changes he was hoping to make. And, Antoine Walker and Gary Payton and Jason Williams and James Posey. And then after the rocky periods, they did win a championship. So if you're getting Durant and Butler, it's not like you're winning the first year, I don't think. I don't think he'd have time to put enough around them. So I think you're really talking about a 2-year build. And I guess without Bam, because you've got to find a versatile big to do those things. And those guys are not easy to find. That's why they maxed him. So I guess the question becomes, how patient is Pat going to be? He's going to go into age 78 to build this thing? Or is it just, I got you Durant, and that's kind of the last thing I gave this franchise, and if we win, we win, and if we don't, we don't. And I don't think that's the way he approaches these things. So what I would say is, if they thought that they could cobble together a roster quickly enough around around Durant and Jimmy, I do think it would be highly tempting for Pat. But I don't think it's ultimately going to come to that. I don't. All right, last one. Here we go. Easy Eddie. Thank you for the super chat. Why is there no talk about Oladipo when targeting the fringe guys like John Wall? Rather keep Debo or bring in someone like Wall. We did a whole episode on this yesterday, so I would recommend you listen to it because the John Wall news kind of broke. During the John Wall news kind of broke while we were doing a podcast on Oladipo and Gabe. So we handled this. Listen to 5 on the Floor. We did like 10 minutes on that. My thought is, listen to 5 on the Floor. My thought is that Debo makes some sense to keep, but I think he's a backup option for them at this point. I think they're waiting to see how other things play out. If he gets overpaid somewhere else, I think they'll let him walk. I think the thing with Debo is that I think Heat fans are afraid of him becoming something somewhere else. I think more so than they really want him to be part of this mix. Does that make sense? It's like they're waiting for him to kind of put all the pieces together and be like, oh, God, we should have kept that guy. And I think that's where the concern is coming from. All right, last one here, because it was a super chat. Jay Sanchez, hey, have you got any undisclosed news you've gotten recently as stars or anything like them? I dropped something the other day, but it's not a star that's a free agent this year. So, I said the other day that I wouldn't be stunned if LeBron takes another turn in Miami, but it's not going to be this offseason. As far as the others, no, I pretty much told everybody everything I know. Look, they're monitoring all of these situations. They're in on them. You'll see the Heat linked to all of these players because they investigate. Andy's on the phone all the time. Okay. Andy and others in the organization. Pat handles the high level stuff. All right. Pat is the vision setter. But the lieutenants are on all this stuff. They know what's going on around the league. They're talking to other GMs. But a lot of this is, like I said, it's in the players' heads. If Bradley Beal doesn't want to leave Washington, there is nothing you can do. The Heat were able to rebuild their franchise because Jimmy Butler decided he wanted to be here. As soon as you see a player start to ask out, okay, whether it's a Dame or whether Levine is looking to leave or whether it's Mitchell, Miami will be in on that player. They know right now that their window is short. Not as a franchise, because they can rebuild this thing around Bam. If they keep Tyler, then maybe him, although I think he goes in a trade. And they'll reshape it again, and they'll do another build. But for this build, the Jimmy build, the time is short. They need to get something done this offseason. I would be disappointed if they don't find at least a third option, okay? And maybe somebody who a lot of nights is their first or second option offensively. I don't expect them to just run it back. If they do, they will say internal development. They will say all those things. They will be very competitive. Eric will coach the hell out of them. But I don't think that's the objective right now. I just think that may be the way it falls. All right, thanks to Manny. I do want to mention before I go, prizepicks.com. That's our fantasy partner. Use that code 5, FIVE, get your initial deposit matched. I'm going through the list of people who've signed up with that code because we're going to start giving away T-shirts to people who sign up. I get the list every day of the names. Okay, so